There's a quiet kind of person who never seems to fit easily into the noise of the world. They speak less, but listen deeply. They notice how light shifts through a window, how time moves quietly, and how even silence carries meaning. These are the deep thinkers, people whose minds live in motion, turning small details into entire worlds of reflection. They aren't slow or uncertain when they pause before speaking. They're considering every possibility, running through layers of meaning, searching for the most truthful expression. To them, words are not just sounds, they are vessels of thought. Deep thinkers often spend more time inside their own minds than anywhere else. They live between ideas, emotions, and questions. It's not simply intelligence that defines them, but sensitivity. They see what others overlook. They sense connections invisible to most. How a falling leaf mirrors the passage of time. How a conversation reflects the human heart. How every glance hides a story. Psychologists call this trait high introspection. It means constantly analyzing not only what happens around you, but also what happens within you. Deep thinkers don't just ask what or how. They ask why, not to challenge, but because why feels like oxygen. Their curiosity is their way of breathing. This kind of reflection activates what scientists refer to as the default mode network, the part of the brain that lights up when we're daydreaming, remembering, or imagining. For deep thinkers, this network is always active. Their thoughts weave and connect, forming new patterns. This constant activity fuels creativity and insight, but it also brings exhaustion. While most people respond quickly to the world, deep thinkers observe it. They pause, they weigh, and often, by the time they've found the right words, the conversation has already moved on. So, they stay silent. That silence isn't disinterest, it's depth. Deep thinkers crave meaning. They prefer conversations that explore truth, emotion, and possibility over casual small talk. For them, surface-level chatter feels empty. They long for exchanges that touch the human core, the fears, hopes, and quiet truths that shape us. But this depth comes with a cost. The same mind that can see beauty in everything can also see complexity everywhere. Deep thinkers replay moments, dissect sentences, and question their own words. They wonder what others meant, whether they said too much or too little. This isn't insecurity, it's awareness. They see nuance in every choice, ambiguity in every emotion. Their minds never rest until meaning is found. In psychology, this process is known as metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Most people do it occasionally. Deep thinkers live inside it. They constantly step outside their own thoughts, observing them from above, rearranging them, questioning them. This makes them highly self-aware, but also vulnerable to self-doubt. When you can see every angle, you also see every flaw. They don't just ask, "What do I want?" They ask, "Why do I want it? What does that desire reveal about me? What happens if I get it? Or if I don't?" They analyze love, ambition, and fear until they can almost hold them in their hands. Yet, in this endless search for understanding, they often forget that not everything needs to be understood. Some things are meant to be felt. That's why deep thinkers often seek solitude. Walking alone, sitting quietly, or getting lost in music isn't loneliness, it's their native language. Solitude gives them room to breathe, to untangle thoughts that others don't even notice. In silence, they find clarity. Their emotions move quietly beneath the surface, calm on the outside, powerful underneath. They might appear distant, but inside, their minds replay moments from years ago, studying what each one meant. This isn't self-punishment, it's exploration. Deep thinkers aren't trying to judge themselves. They're mapping themselves, drawing the geography of their own mind to understand where each feeling lies. This depth sometimes makes them appear detached from reality, when in truth, they are seeing it from more angles than most people can imagine. Psychologists call this existential thinking, the ability to question not just one's life, but life itself. Deep thinkers ponder time, morality, purpose, and consciousness. These questions have no easy answers, but for them, asking is as natural as breathing. This is what separates deep thinkers from simple overthinkers. Overthinking is worrying about the future. Deep thinking is questioning reality. One is driven by fear, the other by curiosity. Yet, even curiosity can become a trap. A mind that connects everything can also imagine connections that don't exist. A silence becomes a sign. A simple word becomes a riddle. Their mental microscope is powerful, but sometimes too powerful. They see details that weren't meant to be examined so closely. Still, that same depth makes them visionary. History's greatest innovators, Einstein, Da Vinci, Jung, were deep thinkers. They saw what others missed. They connected ideas across disciplines, reshaping how the world understood itself. Because when your mind never stops asking why, you eventually uncover truths that no one else has found. Yet in today's world, depth is often mistaken for hesitation. Reflection is confused with weakness. Society rewards speed, confidence, and productivity, not introspection. So, deep thinkers learn to hide their depth. They nod along, smile, and appear engaged while their thoughts travel galaxies away. Their real conversations begin only when they are alone again, revisiting every moment in quiet dialogue with themselves. There's a loneliness in this kind of mind. Deep thinkers long for connection, but only the kind that feels real. Connection built on understanding, not convenience. But not everyone wants to go that deep. So, they stay guarded, waiting for someone who shows signs of depth too. When they find that person, they open completely. They don't share halfway. They reveal their fears, hopes, and hidden thoughts. Because when deep thinkers love, they love consciously. They give their full mind and full heart. But that vulnerability can hurt them. When they invest meaning into everything, even a small betrayal feels immense. Yet a single act of kindness can restore their faith in humanity. For them, nothing is small. Every word, every silence, every gesture matters. This is the double-edged sword of deep thinking. Every thought is alive, every feeling echoes. They can't switch it off. They feel too much, think too deeply, and see too clearly. And yet, it is this very sensitivity that makes them capable of extraordinary understanding and compassion. Deep thinkers experience life in dimensions others might never notice. For them, memory is not a collection of facts. It's a network of feelings, meanings, and symbols. Psychologists call this depth processing, the tendency to encode experience with emotion and reflection. That's why deep thinkers remember how moments felt, not just what happened. A song doesn't just remind them of a time. It reawakens the entire atmosphere of that memory. The scent of the air, the light in the room, the emotion running beneath the surface. Their memories are living ecosystems, not frozen snapshots. This emotional wiring is more than poetic. Studies show that reflective thinkers have stronger neural connections between the emotional and analytical regions of the brain. They literally think and feel at the same time. Their reasoning is woven with empathy. They can't separate the two. That's why logic and compassion often coexist in their choices. But this constant overlap makes them misunderstood. Some people see them as distant, too serious, or overly complicated. In truth, deep thinkers are simply aware of tone, of subtext, of silence. They see the emotional structure behind every interaction. They sense when fear hides behind anger, when pride covers love, when laughter conceals pain. Once you see that deeply, it's difficult to unsee it. Living with such awareness can be exhausting. Deep thinkers struggle to stay present, not because they don't want to be, but because their minds move across time. They replay the past, analyze the present, and imagine countless futures all at once. Their thoughts form timelines that never stop running. Yet within this mental storm lies a quiet kind of beauty, because their ability to see possibility where others see endings gives them resilience. To them, even pain carries information. Every struggle becomes an opportunity to understand life more truthfully. Still, the hardest lesson for a deep thinker is knowing when to stop thinking. Their search for meaning can turn into obsession. They analyze until they forget to feel. They seek understanding when what they truly need is peace. Many eventually learn that meaning isn't something found, it's something created. The goal is not to reach perfect understanding, but to live comfortably with questions. When they finally accept that, something shifts. They begin to see that peace is not in answers, but in presence, in sitting under a sky that offers no explanation but still feels infinite. That's when deep thinking transforms from analysis into wisdom. You can often recognize a deep thinker not by their words, but by their pauses. Before speaking, their mind filters through layers of thought, searching for the truest version of what they mean. It's not hesitation, it's precision. They understand how words can heal or harm, and so they speak carefully. Their awareness extends to everything. They notice micro-expressions, small changes in tone, or subtle shifts in atmosphere. Psychologists link this to high empathic accuracy, the ability to read unspoken emotion. Deep thinkers are emotional detectives, picking up data that others ignore. But seeing too much has a cost. Once you start recognizing contradictions, how people say one thing and feel another, how society praises happiness while hiding its pain, it changes you. You stop craving approval. You start craving truth. This is why deep thinkers often turn to art, philosophy, or solitude. They aren't avoiding life. They're seeking understanding. They need space where thoughts can unfold without judgment. They find comfort in writing, music, or long, quiet walks where ideas can breathe. When they do speak, it's intentional. Their words carry weight because they've already tested them in silence. They prefer conversations that awaken something real, ideas that linger long after they're spoken. But even insight comes with noise. Deep thinkers live with what psychology calls mental rumination, the endless replay of thoughts, feelings, or unresolved problems. Their brain seeks closure where none exists. Even in silence, they can feel like they're standing in front of 10 radio stations playing at once. For most people, distraction silences the mind. For deep thinkers, silence amplifies it. They think not to escape pain, but to make sense of it. The problem is, not every question has an answer. And learning to let go of those unanswerable questions is one of their greatest challenges. There's an old philosophical truth. I think, therefore I am. For deep thinkers, this can feel like both a blessing and a curse. Thought confirms their existence, but it can also consume it. They analyze love until it feels mechanical, study fear until it loses mystery. They can know emotions so well that they forget to feel them. The turning point comes when they realize that thought should serve feeling, not replace it. When they allow logic and emotion to coexist in balance, they reach a higher form of understanding. They become bridges, linking intellect and empathy, reason and compassion. At their best, deep thinkers are translators of the human condition. They can see pain and still hold compassion for it. They can recognize imperfection and still love it. They forgive easily, not because they forget, but because they understand. Every person, to them, is a story shaped by unseen battles. Their forgiveness is not weakness, it's awareness. They see beyond good and bad. They see context, history, cause, and effect. They know that every wound has a reason. This awareness sometimes gives their presence a quiet melancholy. It isn't sadness, it's depth. They understand that beauty and loss are always connected, that everything loved eventually changes form. They accept that joy and grief coexist, like two notes in the same song. Psychologists call this emotional complexity, the ability to experience mixed emotions without confusion. For deep thinkers, emotions aren't labeled as good or bad. They're information. Fear shows what matters. Sadness reveals what's valued. Joy teaches what to protect. To them, every feeling has something to say if you listen long enough. The balance between thought and life. Deep thinkers are often seen as serious, but that perception misses the full picture. Many of the funniest people you'll ever meet are deep thinkers. Their humor doesn't come from carelessness. It comes from perspective. When you see life's absurdities clearly, laughter becomes a way to hold it lightly. They laugh not because they're indifferent, but because they understand how fragile everything is. Humor, for them, is wisdom disguised as play. Still, deep thinkers frequently feel misunderstood. Others may think they are distant or distracted, when in reality, they are processing multiple layers of meaning at once. They are not ignoring you. They are analyzing your words, tone, and emotion. They are trying to understand not just what you said, but why you said it. They do not talk to win, they talk to connect. And when connection doesn't happen, they retreat, not out of pride but protection. The inner life of a deep thinker is porous. They absorb too much. They sense tension in a room, feel the weight of unspoken words, notice when a smile doesn't reach the eyes. Their empathy is both radar and burden. That's why solitude is essential. It's not an escape, it's a detox. Alone, they can clear the emotional residue they've absorbed. Solitude gives them time to reset, to return to their natural rhythm. They may sit quietly, write in a journal, stare out a window, or simply think about nothing in particular. In that quiet, they recover balance. But reflection without grounding can become a spiral. The healthiest deep thinkers learn to anchor their thoughts in something tangible: mindfulness, creativity, or service. They use their reflections to create meaning, not just consume it. They paint, write, compose, or mentor others. They turn insight into contribution. Without expression, their thoughts can become heavy. When they channel them outward, thought becomes creation and reflection becomes healing. They begin to understand that thinking is not meant to replace living. It's meant to enrich it. Deep thinkers rarely accept things at face value. They question traditions, systems, and unexamined beliefs. This questioning isn't rebellion, it's care. They ask, why do we do this? Is it still right? Is there a better way? Their curiosity is an act of integrity, an effort to align life with truth. But seeing multiple perspectives also complicates life. When you understand everyone's side, judgment becomes impossible. You see how pain shapes behavior, how fear drives action, how kindness can hide beneath harshness. This empathy makes deep thinkers compassionate, but it can also make them indecisive. The world becomes too intricate for simple answers. In an age that rewards speed and certainty, deep thinkers move slowly. They hesitate, not because they don't know, but because they care too much about saying something true. In a culture of instant opinions, their silence is often misread as confusion. In reality, it's respect for complexity, for nuance, for truth. This is why deep thinkers often feel out of place in modern society. The world prizes clarity, not contemplation. Yet it's contemplation that builds wisdom. They may not fit the pace of the times, but their depth is a kind of resistance, a refusal to live superficially. To love a deep thinker is to understand that they value understanding more than agreement. They don't need you to think like them, they need you to think with them. Their love language is curiosity. They show affection through attention, by remembering the small details, by noticing what you don't say. They also need patience. They open slowly. Trust is sacred to them, and they test it carefully. Once they decide your soul is safe, they reveal everything. When they love deliberately. Their affection is not casual, it's conscious. To the deep thinker, life is not something to rush through, but to contemplate. They remind us that silence can be sacred, that reflection is not weakness, but strength. They show that mystery has its own beauty, and that not every question demands an answer. In the end, deep thinking reveals something fundamental about being human. Beneath the surface noise of life, every person carries the capacity for depth, the ability to look inward, to pause, to wonder. Deep thinkers are simply those who never stop using it. They slow the world down just enough for the rest of us to remember what matters, that thinking deeply is a form of care. It's not about analyzing life to death, but about honoring it fully, seeing its fragility, its mystery, its fleeting beauty. If you are a deep thinker, don't apologize for your silence. Don't shrink your thoughts to fit into small conversations. The world needs your depth. It needs people who can turn noise into meaning, chaos into understanding. Because depth in a shallow world is its own kind of light. The quiet power of depth. Deep thinkers often live between two worlds, the external one that demands quick answers, and the internal one that thrives on reflection. The challenge is learning how to move between them without losing balance. Many eventually discover that the goal is not to escape the outer world, but to meet it with awareness, to bring reflection into action. The mind of a deep thinker is like an ocean, calm on the surface, full of unseen movement below. Thoughts travel through layers of memory, philosophy, and feeling, each one shaping the next. This kind of mind never truly stops working. Even in rest, it's connecting, interpreting, rearranging. But with time, deep thinkers realize that not every current needs to be followed. Some thoughts can drift. The discipline of a mature, deep thinker lies in restraint, the ability to think deeply without drowning in depth. They learn to let silence be enough, to leave questions unanswered when peace matters more than precision. They learn that wisdom is not in knowing everything, but in knowing what to release. Psychologists sometimes describe this shift as cognitive flexibility, the capacity to let go of thoughts that no longer serve growth. For deep thinkers, developing this flexibility is a form of liberation. It allows them to turn thought into clarity instead of anxiety, and awareness into creativity instead of paralysis. When that balance is reached, deep thinking becomes strength. It sharpens intuition. It refines empathy. It transforms pain into perspective. A deep thinker learns to see beyond reaction, to notice patterns in people, events, and ideas, and to respond with understanding rather than judgment. Their insight often makes them natural guides in times of confusion. They see structure within chaos and meaning within loss. They can hold multiple truths at once, the beauty and the sorrow, the hope and the fear, without needing one to erase the other. That is their quiet power, integration. Deep thinkers rarely seek leadership, but they often become it by necessity. Their calm attention steadies others. Their words, carefully chosen, reach deeper than volume ever could. In a noisy world, clarity is magnetic. People sense it, even if they can't name it. But deep thinkers also face the temptation of isolation. When the outer world feels shallow, withdrawal seems like safety. Yet over time, solitude without connection becomes hollow. The key is not to hide from life, but to participate in it consciously, to engage without losing self-awareness. The healthiest deep thinkers keep their solitude as a foundation, not a fortress. They use their inner world as a lens, not a wall. They observe deeply, then return to the surface to share what they've seen. They write, teach, create, or simply live in ways that remind others to slow down and look again. Deep thinking, at its core, is an act of love, for truth, for meaning, for existence itself. It's a refusal to treat life as disposable. It's the impulse to understand rather than consume, to connect rather than conquer. The world needs this kind of mind. In a time when speed and noise dominate, deep thinkers keep the human story intact. They remind us that complexity is not confusion, it's richness. That silence is not emptiness, it's space for awareness. To think deeply is to care enough to look closer. It's to see not just what is, but what could be. Deep thinkers hold mirrors up to reality, showing both its light and its flaws. They remind us that imperfection is not failure, it's authenticity. And in that awareness lies something profoundly steady. Because when you learn to see with depth, you stop chasing constant validation. You start choosing meaning over motion, truth over appearance, connection over approval. The final paradox of deep thinking is that it begins as analysis but ends as acceptance. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that not everything is meant to be solved. Some things are meant to be lived. So if you are a deep thinker, if your mind never rests, if silence feels like home, remember this: your depth is not a flaw. It is your strength. The world doesn't need you to think less. It needs you to think honestly. Depth does not isolate you from life. It connects you to it. Because the more deeply you think, the more clearly you see how fragile, beautiful, and interconnected everything is. And that kind of seeing is not just thought, it's understanding. That is the psychology of deep thinkers, not minds lost in complexity, but minds committed to truth. Not hearts afraid of feeling, but hearts strong enough to face it. Depth, in the end, is not darkness. It is clarity. It is the light that burns quietly beneath the surface of thought.